Hey everyone, welcome to another hardware news episode. This one we're talking about DDR5 coming up. Actually, there are a couple of functional demos now of DDR5 4400 megahertz memory, looking at 6,000 plus megahertz for the future of that one. And then we'll also be talking about Intel and AMD having some naming annoyances with their chipsets, because apparently that's how childish the industry has become, that we need to just name things in anticipation of the competing products' names in the future. So we'll be talking about that for a little bit as well. Before that, this video is brought to you by Thermaltake's View 37 case. The View 37 focuses on highlighting custom PC builds with its full panoramic window and tinted front acrylic. In our thermal testing, the View 37 performed reasonably well when considering its looks-focused build, which is partly thanks to the airflow design and the removal of a bottom power supply shroud. For a balance of looks and performance, check the link in the description below for the View 37. First up, the big news item, which is DDR5. Micron worked with Cadence to demonstrate new DDR5 memory just recently, and that was using a Cadence test chip and IMC that will be jointly targeted at SoC manufacturers for DDR5 preparation. These are people who will be developers, not consumers. The DDR5 demonstration started with 4400 megahertz memory that was at CL42. That's right, CL42. It was for 8 gigabits of memory, operating at 100 millivolts lower than DDR4's low-end voltage. Micron is targeting an eventual 6400 megahertz frequency, but the immediate future is in the 4000s for frequency. Micron and Cadence both noted that DDR5 presently is more of a capacity play than it is a performance play. So DDR5 is looking at increasing the density to 16 and 32 gigabit dies, with internal ECC supported for people who need it, and that overall the yield should be improved according to the two companies. DDR5 is also meant to stick to the 288-pin standard of DDR4 that we're currently using for the pinout, and adding other new features like built-in voltage regulators and power management circuits will also be interesting, though we're not presently sure how much of that will be consumer-facing versus enterprise and server. We don't know much more than what JEDEC has said and what Micron and Cadence showed at the recent demonstration, but Anandek has a great article detailing the initial showing, and Cadence predicts that DDR5 will overtake DDR4 by 2022. Quick note here, the CL42 thing, this is a super early demo. They'll probably be tightened a bit by launch, but also if you go back and look at the era of DDR3 to DDR4, you'll notice that DDR3 had tighter timings than DDR4 as well. So that's the nature of increasing speeds, especially when you're focusing on things like capacity with DDR5. So we'll see how that develops. But for now, we've got the first functional demo, it looks like, that's actually looking kind of promising. So DDR5 going places, and we'll see if they're predicting 2022 for mass adoption. Not sure if that's server data center or if it's consumer as well, but you could expect platforms would support it obviously before then. Next one, AMD and Intel naming Lunacy. So we already know that Intel's working on a Z390 platform. We've known that for a while. It looks like AMD is also working on its own Z-series platform, something it hasn't had any time in recent history, at least not with Ryzen. And that's going to be called Z490, which is exactly 100 digits higher than Intel's. And that's looking to launch in June or July. We're not positive what Z490 will bring to the table from AMD. We just know that it will exist, and we've independently confirmed that. So the leaks from Blue Chip, a distribution partner, look to be legitimate. We have a roadmap from Blue Chip that shows Intel's first 8-core engineering samples due for June, according to the leak, and Intel's Z390 platform targeted for third quarter 2018. The engineering samples obviously predate the retail samples, so we're looking at third quarter for 8-core CPUs to ship on Z390, and AMD's B450 lower-end platform will be shipping in July to August of this year, likely with a few units shown behind closed doors at Computex, if not publicly. Threadripper 2 is also known for August and was already publicly known for that date, and that's still on track. So here's where the annoying part comes in. We talk about GPP and needing clarity for gamers. You know what could actually use a GPP? Motherboards and motherboard vendors. So here we've got B250, this is Intel. We have B350, this was AMD Ryzen, and clearly was a sort of jab at Intel, maybe take over some of the... It kind of makes sense because AMD was the underdog coming in with Ryzen, and so to build on top of Intel's known and understood naming meant that AMD had fewer walls to break down when they're trying to get to new consumers. So that's part of it. Then you have stuff like B360, which is Intel. I had to look at the box. Can't keep them straight anymore. And now we've got B450 coming out and some other stuff too. So the problem I have with this is, like, I get it. AMD came in trying to take some of the recognition that Intel had in terms of people understanding what the product is. So they had R3, R5, R7. Pretty clear what those are. If you understand Intel's naming scheme, makes a lot of sense. I'm pretty much okay with that. I would have liked something like R4, R6, R8, because that would be the core count of each of those things for the most part, minus the 1500X. But that's not what we got. We got an Intel equivalent naming. That's fine. What I've got more problems with is the ongoing chipset naming equivalence. Intel doesn't want to budge, probably because they're like, we did this first, and AMD is just keeping with what they started with Ryzen. So now we've got chipsets that in the worst cases are 10 digits apart in name, or in normal cases 100 digits apart in name, because AMD is just trying to be 100 higher than Intel and therefore be better, I guess. They also did the whole Frontier Edition versus Founders Edition thing, but it's annoying. It's annoying as a reviewer even. We work with this stuff every day, and when writing stuff, we still have to go back and double check, did we say B360 or B350? And it's kind of hard to keep track of as reviewers even, especially with the stuff coming up soon, Z490, B450, all that stuff. So for consumers, especially those who aren't like you all, people who come back once every 3 years to build a system, it's going to get really confusing really fast. And I think AMD have built up a lot of goodwill with Ryzen. It's clearly a part that's highly competitive and should do well and is doing well. Maybe it's time to take your own naming. Do something unique, or I don't know, even Intel, I guess, create something new. But if we could just stop copying each other like children, that would be great. Either one of you, just one vendor, please do something different for the naming. It's gotten a bit crazy. Next one, speaking of things that are annoying, Kaby Lake X. Kaby Lake X was the worst received CPU that we reviewed last year. It's the one that I tossed on the table. And that one, Intel has announced the end-of-life status for Kaby Lake X, which I think is less than a year old. It was good for a few things. It was good for memory overclocking. They had pretty strong IMCs, the engineering samples especially. They were okay for overclocking. And when I say that, I mean competitive overclocking. As a consumer part, completely, utterly pointless and wasteful, and no one should have bought them, and apparently no one did, because they've killed them. So the i5 7640X, which is probably the stupidest part, and the i7 7740X, both 4-core parts that made up the low end of Intel's X299 compatible HEDT line, those are now dead, and they're relatively low value anyway, given X299 requires a much more premium motherboard generally, and no vendors were catering to those Kaby Lake X parts anyway. Also, Threadripper took away some of the thunder from the low-end HEDT parts anyway. So, yeah, those are dead now. That's good news. Let's move on to the next one. Intel using China factories for additional Coffee Lake assembly and testing. Intel announced that they'll be using facilities in China to test and assemble the Core i5 and i7 Coffee Lake CPUs. Intel says this will allow them to further increase supply of the 6-core Coffee Lake variants. Starting in May, consumers can expect to see Coffee Lake CPUs, that is i7 8700K, 8700, 8600K, 8500, and 8400, on the market that have been tested and assembled in Chengdu, China. Intel assures that all procedures and production methods are the same across their global production facilities. Next one, Spectre intensifies. Heisem Magazine, let me get the name right, C''T, pretty sure that's how it's pronounced. C''T released a report that suggested a new set of Spectre vulnerabilities looming, presently known as Spectre NG. Intel responded to the report via its blog, indirectly responded, and stated that the company is working closely with partners and everyone else in the industry, chip makers noted specifically, to understand the vulnerabilities and attack vectors for the new Spectre variants. The company recommended keeping systems up to date for safety for the time being and has announced no additional information on Spectre NG. The C''T publication got ahead of any official NDA lifts, kind of like what happened previously, and highlighted that 8 CVE, or common vulnerability enumerator attacks are in need of standalone patches, some of which are coming up in May from Intel, so they're already ahead of this a bit. The magazine claims that Intel is already working on 2 rounds of patches, again targeted for May, and C''T lightly detailed an attack that could affect cloud server hosts similar to Meltdown, which would be exploited via VM host attack vectors. ARM and Intel are most possibly affected, and AMD might be. AMD is affected by one existing Spectre attack variant that we know of, but there's nothing concrete either way on the current documentation for the new Spectre attack vectors. This one's sort of interesting. Bikesky, whatever, introduced 2 new water cooling components this week, both of which are inline thermal monitors for open loop liquid cooling. The components mount to the fittings and use an inline thermistor at water inlet for monitoring. As of now, it doesn't look like there's a way to export this data to software, unfortunately, and it appears limited to on-device readings. Bikesky also released a real-time thermal monitor for video cards named the BVGA SCAL, complementing the TME, and it works the same way. The materials are anodized aluminum materials, including marketing silliness about being aircraft-grade aluminum. Hopefully they're also made with aircraft-grade discomfort from the awful marketing. The units are priced at $40 to $50 for each of them. Corsair announced a new Spec 05 case this week. So that's it. Just like most of the other cases in the world right now, it has a largely closed-off front panel. It's got some side intake and a weird sort of artsy wannabe cut in the front of it that should let some amount of air through, I guess. We'd like to see that front slit widened more so that it can let more air in, kind of like the one that Lian Li showed at CES, not the dynamic or the O11, but the other case, because that would at least get you some functional amount of air through there and still be kind of a design element. But for now, it's another limited airflow case. This one has an acrylic window, though. It's at $50, so at least it's affordable. The next story is an interesting one from just the industry in general. An e-waste recycler undercutting Microsoft is being sued, and it looks like sentenced to a 15-month prison term and a $50,000 fine for the alleged infringement of Microsoft's products and profits by attempting to resell restore disks. Eric Lundgren made 28,000 of the disks and intended selling these repair disks to computer refurbishers for about 25 cents a piece. According to Microsoft, this is copyright infringement and counterfeit goods traffic. Microsoft asserts that while software licenses are transferable, commercial resellers must purchase a new license for $25, not 25 cents. Also of note, Eric Lundgren, the one who was sued and has been sentenced, seemed to indicate that he didn't think anyone in the courtroom understood what a repair disk was. Probably realistic. So Lundgren argued that his disks had no value to Microsoft or anyone else, and that they were only intended to be used to restore systems with an existing OS license. The idea being that it limits the amount of people throwing their decent computers away from a hardware perspective because they need to restore their software because they had a virus or whatever. This is for people who go to repair shops, not anyone who watches this channel for the most part. So the court concluded that Lundgren's 28,000 disks were worth $700,000. He paid fewer than 5 cents a piece for them. And that amount warrants apparently a 15-month prison stay and $50,000 in fines. A lawyer from Microsoft alleges that the sales of, quote, counterfeit operating systems displaces Microsoft's potential sales of genuine operating systems. Lundgren and his attorney said that the court has set a precedent for Microsoft and other software makers to pursue criminal cases against those seeking to tackle e-waste and extend the lifespan of computers. Kind of falls into the right to repair bucket for that one. And then finally, also, leave your thoughts below on that. I'll kind of leave mine out and just see what you all think. Hardware sales for the week. The R7 1700 is looking really good right now. That's $220 to $250, depending on if you look at Newegg or Amazon. We'll put links in the description below for that sale. At that price, it's worth buying it over the 2000 series R7s if you're kind of budget conscious, because we do really like the R7 1700, mostly if you overclock it. If you're willing to overclock it to 3.9 or 4.0, it's an incredibly competitive processor, primarily in production. It does well enough in gaming at this price point to be worth a buy. So we'll leave a link down there for that. And then EVGA Supernova 650G1 fully modular power supply is also currently marked down 17% at time of filming. We'll leave a link for that one as well if you're looking for a new power supply in the 650 watt range. That's all for this one. As always, subscribe for more. Go to patreon.com/gamersnexus to help us out directly. Go to store.gamersnexus.net to pick up one of our 3D laser engraved teardown crystals with our 3D logo in it. It's pretty cool. Or the GN anti-static mod mat. Thanks for watching. I'll see you all next time.